Number one, it's the best form of marketing that exists. There's no other form of marketing that can do that.
Today, we sit down with Ryan Sullivan, founder of the Podcast Principles.
He launched over 100 podcasts for businesses and has over 17,000 followers on LinkedIn.
We speak about how to grow a podcast the right way.
Going in without a strategy, obviously it gets me going a little bit. The problem is founders, entrepreneurs, they post content. Posting content doesn't make people do anything, right? You're just saying stuff, right? You need to have people
the best way to leverage your podcast for leads.
If you want to have your clients sell for you, then you just need to let them talk.
And when your business should expect to see some results.
It depends on the stage of the business. But for organic content,
what are some common mistakes that entrepreneurs make when starting a podcast? And how can they avoid these mistakes?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say the big mistake is it stems from not having any goals or having undefined or unrealistic goals. But it's mostly that we've been brainwashed by entrepreneurs who are really just influencers. And so we think that's what we're supposed to do. And what I mean by that is it seems like success if you're an entrepreneur and you have like a podcast or you're building an audience. It seems like success is just more. Like, oh, if I just have more views, more followers, more everything, then everything will be better because I see this other founder and they have 1 million followers and so they must be very successful. And so that's just not reality, you know? So I'd say that's one of the big misconceptions that becomes a challenge is because they don't know why they want more, but we all want more. It's life. We're human beings. That's what we want, right? But I'm here to dispel that myth for sure.
I saw you mentioning also about starting a podcast without having any strategy. That many people, they don't even know why they're starting a podcast. And we see this problem as well, this mistake, since we have been working in this field. So what do you think about this? What's your opinion about it? Your point of view?
Yeah, we basically don't know why we do a lot of things, right? So that's why that happens with a podcast. What I always say is the reason why we have these problems with content is not because things don't work. It's because things do work. It's because you can get more views and make more money. It's because SEO works. It's because email works, right? And so the reason why a lot of entrepreneurs are successful is because their gut was right. It's because their intuition was right. But you can't scale intuition, right? So when you go, well, I did these other things and they worked, so now I'll do a podcast. That'll work. The problem is that's like one piece of the 100 pieces that you need for that podcast to work. So the reason you're starting it is because the same reason you started everything else. Well, I didn't know I was going to have a business, and then I have a business, and then I have an employee, and then we have, look at this thing we've created. And so going in without a strategy is I'm not, obviously it gets me going a little bit, but I can't be mad. I can't be angry at these entrepreneurs because they never had a strategy to begin with. And this is something that we see in content, right? Which is they're like, yeah, I only hire people who understand our business and understand our mission and our vision. It's like, nobody understands your business. You don't even understand your business, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. That's why coaching exists, right? So that's why we exist, because my job is not to come in and understand your business. I'm going to do that in the process, right? But my job is to eliminate the 90% of stuff we shouldn't do and focus on the 10% that we should do. And that's really a strategy is just a fancy word for priorities, right? So when we come in, we figure out, okay, what are we really going to prioritize here to get the results that we want? So yeah, you need a strategy. Most people don't have one, but you do need one if you want to achieve predictable results. It's just inputs and outputs at the end of the day. So great question.
Okay. It reminds me of Alex Hormozi's approach regarding strategies. I don't know if you heard this from.
Oh yeah, that's where I got that.
Yeah,
Strategies
reminded
is
of him.
just priorities. That's a full Hermosi vibe right there. But it's really true. It is, and people will argue all day about what it is and what it isn't. But that's the point, right? And the plan is not the strategy, right? The strategy is a lot. There's a lot more intangible things in the strategy than people realize, right? But that's why I give away everything, right? Now, the reason why I can't give away the strategy is because it's custom to you, you know?
Do you have some specific examples of businesses that have scaled effectively through podcasting, and what did they do differently?
Many examples. The big one being Wealth Warehouse. They are what I like to call, it's called a niche times 3, right? There's like that song. It's like Chris Brown's song, which probably people don't have their opinion of Chris Brown, but it's like, yeah, times 3, right? Yeah. So this is the same thing, but for niche. So it's niche. And so it's niche. It's basically industry, what I would call a macro niche. None of these terms matter. Just get the main point. Industry, macro niche, micro niche. So it's like insurance, life insurance, and then infinite banking concept. You don't need to know what that is, but just go sales, roofing sales, enterprise roofing, or commercial roofing sales. And then in commercial roofing sales, you can have commercial roofing sales that are above, $100,000 jobs or above $1 million jobs. Or you have somebody who has a gas station, right? Then you have people who own one gas station, then you have people who own 10 gas stations, and then you have people who own 30 plus gas stations. Okay, there can be a podcast for each of these niches. So that's the kind of how I look at this in terms of, all right, what are the successful podcasts that you've worked on? What have they done differently? Well, they knew the niche within the niche that they were in, right? And so that is what you need to understand. Like, we are podcasting, but within podcasting, we have LinkedIn client acquisition, right? So we're a podcast company that understands LinkedIn. We're a LinkedIn company that understands podcasting. We know the niche that we're in. We know the field that we're playing on, right? And so all of the most successful shows that we've worked on have all understood what their niche within their niche is. So that's what I would give everybody is what you really need is, back to the strategy, is a brand strategy. You have to figure out your differentiator. That's going to make the podcast that much easier. But sometimes you don't. Some people can just get on and talk and just build an audience, And so if you can do that, then great. And if we add a strategy on top of it, then even better.
So let's not just talk about leads or clients, but how can entrepreneurs build a tribe, as you always say, of returning listeners that go back to their episode, their podcast, and build a strong community around the podcast?
Yeah, that's another good question. And it depends on what you want, right? So you can build a podcast that doesn't have this like diehard audience that listens every week, and it can still be successful. So we can talk about what that would look like. But if we're talking about, no, I really want a audience of diehard fans, whether it's 50 or 500 or 5,000 of them. And to do that, there's a few things you have to have, right? Which is number one, predictability, So you got to know that the audience knows when the content's coming, and when you're releasing it, right? And you have to stick to that schedule. Doesn't mean one a week. Doesn't mean one a month. It's just whatever the predictable schedule is. Then number two, content has to be good. If it's not entertaining, right? And that's hard for me because, it's hard for me to say, hey, this content's not good, but there's other ways to say it, right? Meaning it's just not moving the needle. Like, it's just generic, right? And that comes from not having a differentiator, right? And then so we have predictability, unique content, right? And then we have distribution. So it's not enough for you to just release a podcast episode every week, for the most part. Right? At least for what we're talking about, right? Bombs being dropped here. So you also need to remind people that you exist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't judge a podcast only by the downloads. I still think there's people when I used to run my in-person podcast that would only watch the clips. And I think that's I think that's a listener too, right? That's more of a watcher, but whatever, they're a follower, right? So I don't look at this in binary terms, but that's really the core, 3 is and with those, if you are predictable, if you have some kind of unique angle or value, and then you're constantly marketing, basically like, never always be marketing instead of only always be closing. Glengarry Glen Ross, it's a good movie. But in this case, it's always be marketing. And that's something that a lot of, especially entrepreneurs, it's like you have to run this entire business, and now you're going to not only do this podcast, but you're going to market this podcast too. And it's like that's now a full-time job. So that's where companies like yours come in, companies like ours too.
Exactly. We're here to help. Can you explore a little bit more the first option you mentioned regarding downloads or having like a very big community? Because we know that some podcasts, they might not have a big community, but it doesn't mean that it's not successful towards their business, right?
How I look at this is the podcast is just a part of the ecosystem. So there's 2 companies, right? There's my company and then there's another company, right? There's one, hair salon, and then there's another hair salon. But this hair salon has a podcast where the people who are doing the hair, like who getting their hair done, are getting interviewed about getting their hair done. Okay. Now that's a very different, everything's now different, right? That perception of that hair salon is like, this is weird. It's a little crazy, but that's going to attract a certain type of person to that hair salon. And guess what? That the competitor hair salon has absolutely nothing they can compete on at that level, right? So it's a way to automatically differentiate. Now, will it turn customers away? 100%. That's what this is supposed to do, right? It's like my content is supposed to attract and repel. And to be honest, I don't think I'm that good at the repelling part. That's what I'm trying to get better at, right? I want everybody to like me. I want to be universally liked. It's just what I want personally. It's just what my, ego wants, right? And that's why these people are successful. That's why these founders are successful, is because they function in the same way, right? Is because a lot of people know them, like them, trust them, right? All those good things. But back to the community part though, right? You will build a diehard fan base of 50 people if you do those salon interviews, or if you do this type of podcast, right? And that's your audience. An audience member does not need to be a client. I have so many quote unquote, like whatever you want to call, I wouldn't even say them, right? They're all individual people, but fans, followers, whatever. They've never bought anything from me, right? And I'll still do them a favor, right? I'll still be there if they need some help with something because they've been supporting the content, right? And then so this is something that I think definitely for founders and entrepreneurs who haven't created content, I started this by creating content before I even had a business, right? So I went in with this mindset, which is pros and cons, but really there's a difference between fans, followers, subscribers, prospects, clients, haters. Some of them overlap. Hopefully your clients are not your haters, but some of them overlap. And so how are you stratifying this, right? Like, how can you see somebody in your audience and go, I know who they are, right? That's a client, right? It's like a lot of my clients don't listen to my podcast. Some of them do, right? But the ones that do, they go, oh, you know what? Yeah, that is right. I had one of my friend Miranda, who's a client. She was like, oh, I saw your podcast pop up and I forgot I had to book this last call, right? So it's just a certain, demographic within your entire ecosystem of people who are going to consume the podcast, and that designing part and the strategy around it is what defines which one of those people is gonna consume it, for the most part. And then I will also say you also have no idea, so you don't know till you put it out there.
That is true. Yeah, by the way, sign me up for this saloon podcasting thing. I think that would be a blast.
I think idea. That was, so right? I know
that is a fun idea.
That might be the trajectory
I mean-
of podcast principles, is like going into random businesses and giving them podcast ideas.
But I mean, it's like it makes them special, you know. That's the thing, and they can like imagine like people seeing this in their cities, like, hey, this saloon is having podcasting, and you can see the clips of them doing this. That could actually get some traffic. So yeah, if you have a saloon, whatever, and you hear that, maybe try it out. So let's know business. They want obviously more clients. They want more leads. So if you could compare this to other strategies like podcasting compared to, I don't know, content marketing in general, email marketing, webinars, SEO, how high would you rate podcasting?
Number one, it's the best form of marketing that exists. Now, this is for a few reasons. Yeah, like this is a debate. Now, I know podcasting's better, but we could talk about it all day, you know, let the internet internet. But here's why. You name something in marketing and I can explain how a podcast can do it. So there's no other form of marketing that can do that. Okay. So SEO, you are going to speak the way you speak on a podcast with more keywords in a more natural way than if you tried to write an SEO optimized article. Now, the SEO optimized article is going to be, quote unquote, it's going to have more keywords, but it's not necessarily reflective of the way that people talk, which is reflective of the way that people think, which is reflective of the way that people search things. And SEO is based on search, right? So, okay, great. Now our transcript from our podcast gets embedded in the blog. The video gets embedded too. And now we have our blog. And then if we optimize our podcast for SEO, then all of that trickle down content is now optimized for SEO, right? Email. Cold email, I would say you could definitely use a podcast for that. Client interview, etc. Get creative, right? But let's talk email list. 100 ways to do it. An episode can be an email. That's an easy one. You can combine the best episode of the month, the most downloaded. That could be your last email of the month, right? There's so many ways to use this content, right? Obviously, you know our system we run, which is 90% of our content is from our podcast, and we do 0 paid marketing and 0 outbound. So it's all referrals and inbound from LinkedIn, and all of that, 90% of that content is from our podcast. So that's my pitch. I just don't think there's another version of content that can do what a podcast can do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I find podcasting nowadays a huge marketing tool for business, especially. And I was talking to David about it as well, that I think podcasting is going to have another boom soon as well, because of the all AI content that is being created nowadays. I think podcasting is a perfect way to see authenticity still of the humans engaging, talking, having real talks, while, for example, on Instagram or whatever, Facebook, TikTok, nowadays it's way easier to just create content using AI, so it's way less natural. So I believe in the next years, podcasting is going to be very, very powerful again, and people will start seeing like how amazing and how it can be used as a marketing tool, right, to boost businesses and everything. So now I would like to know how we can convert podcast listeners into leads while smoothly we integrate sales messaging without sounding so salesy, you know? Because I saw the video I told you I was watching, you mentioned also about strategy, that you like very much the interviews with clients, right? So I believe that can be tricky a little bit, because maybe it will sound salesy, you know? So how would you do that?
If you want to have your clients sell for you, then you just need to let them talk, right? If you talk about your service, then that might sound salesy, right? Like I've done multiple callbacks to my service throughout the this podcast episode so far, but I didn't sell it to you, right? You don't know the price. You don't really know how it's done. So you know what I do, right? And so there's a way to do that, but that's what my philosophy is, which is interview your clients, but interview them, not for you, for them, right? Have them talk about stuff that's not even related, right? So obviously the point of it when they come on is they know what's going on. They know I'm going to obviously talk about podcast principles and my experience with them, but I am the host, meaning myself. I get to guide that conversation. So I may open it with some kind of accolade or a metric or, hey, you've been podcasting for 6 months. How do you feel? That it's the feeling. Like, that's why people are doing, that's why people work with you. That's why people work with us, is because there's somebody there to go, yeah, you know what? Maybe let's try that. Or, you know what? I like what you said there. Let me put this down. Or what do you think about this strategy? Right? It's a very like one-to-one communication, conversational way of doing it. If you don't want to sound salesy, just don't sell in your content. And you won't sound salesy. But the question is, how do you do that? Right? You still have to intrigue people. Yeah. So listen, I there's not a one way to do this, but the way that I look at it is have pieces of content for every piece of the sales funnel. And so I'll just also caveat with saying, if you don't have a salesperson, then you're the salesperson. If you don't have a marketer, then you're the marketer. If you don't have a VA, then you're the VA, right? So if you are the salesperson or the marketer, then this is your job. So you better listen up. How this works is there's 3 stages of the funnel in a very simplified way that kind of doesn't really reflect reality, but imagine it does. Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of the funnel. Within those 3 stages, there's 5 steps. Now, I made those up based on my experience and my client's experience. So you don't have to follow my framework. But let's just say in reality, all of this works and it works for you perfectly. We have a podcast episode, multiple 5 to 10 podcast episodes for each stage of the process, right? Then within those podcast episodes, we can create 3 to 5 different posts, right? And those posts then reflect each stage of that process. So by creating a podcast that covers each step of the buyer journey, those podcasts create posts that covers each step. And by doing that, you create content that covers each step. So if you then follow it in this way, you will have content that brings people to you. And then the question is, though, because this is the one that everybody wants to know, is what is that content? What's the content that gets people to go, I'm going to hire you? That content is, in our experience, content with clients or content with results. So what we do is we say, hey, here's all the podcasts we've helped produce. Listen, would you like to listen to them? I'm not telling you to do a podcast. I'm saying, look at all of our clients. This could be you, right? So it's not selling. It's more so just if you're driving by, right, you're probably going to ignore the car that's at the edge of the road at the dealership unless you're looking for that car. Then you're going to stop and be like, oh, that's actually the car I'm looking for, right? So you have to be willing to give up everything except for attracting the 6 people in your audience that are ready to buy, right? And so not only does that client interview have my client talking about the experience, it says, here's the results. You know, Shelby came in like this as the owner of a social media management company. She wanted to launch a podcast for her audience. From 0 to month 12, here's exactly what we did. Boom, 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 boom. At the end, it says she now has 15,000 downloads. She loves her podcast. She listens to her own podcast. Haha, awesome. And then it says, are you ready to be like Shelby? Do you want to be like her? Right. And so All I'm trying to attract is those 5 or 6 people who are like, yeah, I actually would want to do that, right? And so that's how it really works.
So you are basically just talking about like the experience of the person. How was it? Being supernatural, right? And just at the very end, you're going to kind of do the CTA, right?
Oh, yeah, you still have to sell, right? There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're going to do the selling last.
Oh, yeah, so the CTA is whatever you want it to be. Now, we are trying, meaning me, trying to do this without discovery calls. So that's been a experiment that I've done, where I'll have a post like that. The CTA will be DM me, right? I will DM that person, or that person will DM me, sorry. And then I will message them back and say, hey, thanks for your interest. I'd like to send you a 5-minute Loom video of the strategy and the pricing. If you like what you see there, then we'll move to a call. Sound good? Then they say, yeah, sounds good. Okay, then I send them a Loom video that has the beginning of the strategy, right? Like, here's what this is great. This is what I would change, right? Here's a couple clients we worked with, and then here's the price. And then they get back to me, and what we're trying to do here is obviously get a deposit, but set a start date. When are we going to start? I don't care if they go, that's expensive. We don't have the money for that now. We're trying to budget for Q1, whatever. That's fine. Then I just set, okay, reach back out, or let me get a deposit now, and then we'll start in 2 months. So the CTA on the post, coming back to that, is just reflective of what you want that client, really more so client/prospect journey to be like. And this is just not like, I'm obsessed with this stuff, but this is not things that people map out. The problem is founders, entrepreneurs, they post content. Posting content doesn't make people do anything, right? You're just saying stuff, right? You need to have people take an action, right? You need to entice them, intrigue them, right? And so that's the way that we like to do it, because if you really are as good as you say you are, if you really have the business you say you have, if you have the clients you say you have, right? If you have the results that you say you have, then why don't you just show me? Like, I can call my client right now. Like, one of them will answer, but like, I could call them right now and be like, hey, what do you think about podcast principles? And they would tell you, right? Like, so if that's the case, then just call them and record it, or whatever. But it's just, for some reason, people don't want to do that.
Are there any pitfalls you would say, like, don't avoid doing this during these client interviews? Have you ever anything experienced in your time now?
Yeah, I love that we're talking about client interviews, because I mean, you guys probably know. I mean, I've been pushing them so much, I actually stopped posting. I was posting like once a week, and I got some good, like,
no, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, well, no, I have other things that I want to talk about, but pitfalls, I would say, I think just treating it like as if it's a sales call, like, the best thing that your clients can do is just talk openly. That's what we really want them to do, right?
Yeah.
People in their mind, like, people are going to emotionally justify this decision. Obviously there's logic behind it too, but you want to make a connection, so it's more about that. So I would say, number one, that really what you want is the before and after of the feelings and experience. Like, before I went in, I had no podcast, or I had a terrible podcast, and then I came out and now I'm happy about my podcast, or now my podcast is bringing leads, or like my podcast is just doing what I want it to do now, So whatever that outcome is of whatever service you sell, that's what you want to capture there. And, you want to that's what you want the client ultimately to say, is just to talk openly. And then on top of that, it's for clips. Like, it's not for the long form thing. Having, which we have 5 to 10 hours of our clients talking is great, but I mean, I don't expect people to go and listen to it and watch that. It's more so for the marketing material. So don't get caught up. Like, you don't need to have a podcast to do this. You just have to, record it. And now, obviously, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I think the one of the best things about the client interviews are obviously, like, they speak the language of the clients. I mean, when we talk, sometimes we're probably going to go then in some jargon that those people don't understand. But yeah, these clients make them really feel heard. It's like, yeah, that's exactly me. So we definitely believe our clients should do this as well. There's just one thing. What do you think about potential client interviews? This is something Alex Hormozy actually started with his gym launch. Someone revealed this and said, do this. And he's had very good experience with that.
So it's like prospect interviews?
Yeah, that's what Alex Hormozy did with Gym Launch. He put like people in and said, hey, you want to jump on the podcast? We talk about gym stuff. And then afterwards, because it was like they got exposure and stuff, they said the closing rate exploded. Tried that before?
I've not done it, but I think it's a great strategy.
Okay.
It's called account-based podcasting, and it works. Like if you interview 100 people, you have a good business, you're successful, you have a real funnel, you have a real team, all that stuff, like everything you need, all the boxes checked. And then if you interview 100 and they're ideal prospects, then you should close a lot of them, right? So yeah, it's a very time-intensive way of doing it. But all lead generation is time intensive if it's good. So yeah, I'm with that. No, I'm totally with it. I'm not against any podcast strategy as long as it works for you.
unless sit down and talk.
Yeah, unless it's tell me about yourself.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah, that's what we see a lot, unfortunately. By the way, what do you think about sponsorships and affiliate links, affiliations?
Mostly irrelevant. That's my opinion. You're not. Mostly, here's the thing. I have 2 clients who have surprised me, and they're like, hey, I need help. We're going to land some sponsors before we launch the podcast. And I'm like, okay. I was like, sounds good. I'll help you guys. Yeah. So, and guess what? They did it. Because listen, my clients are better than me. Like my clients are like crazy podcast. Like these people are visionaries. They're go-getters. They're very disciplined. Like they see what they want. Like they're thinking big. That's why I have this business, right? So I can be surrounded by these people and we help each other. It's amazing like that. But yeah, our clients have helped us make half of what we do because they go, could we do this? And we're the type of company that goes, well, I think that's crazy, but the best ideas are crazy, so let's see if we can do it. And so that's why I say it's mostly irrelevant because if you're like, oh my God, automatically we're going to get 5,000 to 10,000 a month in sponsorships and it's going to take 30 days. Like, yeah, that's not realistic. But if you have a niche podcast, which both of these are, or the ones that have decent sponsors are, then 100% I'm with that. And then I'd say on the affiliate side of things, if you want to pay for the subscriptions that you use, then you can use affiliate links to do that. But I would say beyond covering the cost, I don't think it's worth really, it's not worth the time and effort to get a 5% to get 10% of a $20 a month subscription, right? In my opinion. So
I agree.
All across the board, what I always say is if you need more revenue or more clients, just be your own sponsor, be your own affiliate, push your stuff, right? That's why I'm doing this. Is my 3rd podcast today. Like this is all I do. Like this is what we need to do. It's Alex Hormozy. We need people to know what we do, right? Like Alex Hormozy doesn't know what I do, but eventually he will. Right? Because I need enough. There will be I'll do it so much that everybody or a good amount of people will know, right? It's like, that's how I look at it. So if you need to keep promoting your stuff and the things that you sell, then, have affiliate links. I have them, right? I use them, but I'm not out there like pushing them on every post,
Yeah, but you put them in the descriptions of the videos, for example, right? On YouTube.
David told me to change my YouTube description.
True.
But no, I don't think I had them in there. I think I just had links to my own stuff.
I don't remember. Where you put the links normally? Because the ones I normally see, for example, if people post on YouTube, they put in the description, right? The links. And for your case, where do you put these links?
Oh, so I would put them if I was talking about that certain thing in the video. Then I would post them there. Yeah. So only where relevant. I mean, my affiliate links, like I'm happy with just sending them when somebody needs them. and that's enough, because it's not about quantity. It's about people it's not about people buying it for a month and then canceling, You want people to actually use it. So I might have to do a 10-minute thing about why they should use this thing, But yeah, I'd say for sure. I mean, you guys, that's the YouTube game. The YouTube game is if you can if you have 100 views, you're not getting any affiliates. Now, if you have 100,000, now you are. But if you have 100,000 views, why aren't you the affiliate link? Why isn't your business the affiliate, the sponsor? So, see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, 100% agree. My opinion is very strong on that. It's so are you trying to count pennies now, or are you trying to make like the big bucks? Because instead of helping other people making money, you also make money by sending them to your business. So yeah, totally with you there, unless, as you said, it makes sense. For example, a partnership where it's like goes hand in hand. So for example, as we work a lot with like remote podcasting, or we work with like YouTube stuff. So a partnership with like a remote podcaster or a YouTube platform, that can make sense, unless it's not profiting not both sides. So it always should be a win for both sides. But yeah, totally with you there. It's like, sponsor yourself.
Sponsor yourself. Yep. That's what I'm pushing.
Same. So you're very successful on LinkedIn, I could say so, with 17,000 followers. So how would you integrate your podcasting now with LinkedIn?
Yeah. So do you integrate the podcast with LinkedIn, or do you integrate LinkedIn with the podcast?
Or vice versa,
you see
whatever you want.
Yeah. Rhetorical question. Yeah. So I've tried to do it all. I think it is possible, but it doesn't work. Meaning, if you try to make one piece of content do everything, it's probably not going to really do anything, right? So if that is the case, what I would do if I had the perfect, I will get to the LinkedIn, but if I had the perfect kind of framework here, I would hire somebody like you guys or a YouTube expert, and I would make YouTube videos. And then I would have, which probably would work on LinkedIn. What works on YouTube will work on LinkedIn, but what works on LinkedIn won't work on YouTube, right? So that could probably work. So then that would be good
platforms.
There. Yeah, and then I would have a podcast that's maybe like what you said, maybe a client interview show or a prospect interview show or an industry show or something like that. So that would be able to connect me with partners or big industry leaders. And then I would have my LinkedIn content, which is a little bit of amalgamation of everything, right? But to answer the specific question, how do you find this mesh between podcasting and LinkedIn? It's creating podcasts that people on LinkedIn actually want to consume. So what is that? Well, that would be different for every audience.
But it's a good question.
It's a good question. Now, what in this case, I don't overly promote my podcast on LinkedIn, meaning I don't promote it every day or twice a day or anything like that, because I'm really, all I'm trying to do is just give advice that actually works, or that people will try. Because if they try that and then that works, then they might go ahead and hire us, right? So that's ultimately what my goal is. But if your goal on LinkedIn, if you're like, I'm financially stable, like I don't need more clients, I'm just doing this for personal brand reasons. Oh, great. Well, then just push the podcast only. Everything should be podcast clips. Everything should be links to the podcast, right? And capture them there. But how we do it is we just create podcasts and YouTube videos that work on LinkedIn, and we could get into how that works too.
What metrics actually matter to know if your podcast is killing it or actually flopping?
Yeah, that's good. It's unfortunately, it sucks because it depends. But I've vilified downloads before, but I won't right now, which I'll say downloads are a good metric. They're a metric. They let people know, hey, this many people clicked and listened for at least 30 seconds or a minute. So that's good. We don't use that metric in our business. We use basically lead to close or lead to book a call to close, whatever you want to use, right? So I could get caught up in marketing metrics, and this is a huge problem in marketing, is getting caught up in marketing metrics and not actually just looking at what the revenue differences are based on what we do. Yeah. Meaning like top line revenue to marketing spend, or top line revenue to amount of podcast episodes, or top line revenue to amount of clips posted of the podcast year over year for 5 years. Like those are the real metrics if you really want them. What's the ROI of our content? Well, let's look at, all right, we did 3.2 million this year, and we had, or say we did 3.2 million in 2023, and we spent 150,000 on the podcast. 2024, we did 4.8 million, and we spent the same amount on the podcast. Okay, obviously there might be things there that you're not seeing, but if it's like, all right, it went up, we kept our paid the same, we did maybe a few more emails, but for the most part, everything was the same, but our revenue went up. Okay, great. Then we can keep the podcast. So that's an easy way to look at it. But you have to have a good P&L. You have to know what you're spending where. You have to know how much you're spending on freelancers versus, right? So it's like this gets so deep into marketing. But in terms of like how to know that your podcast is killing it, it's long as it's doing what you want it to do. That's the only metric.
How long do you think it takes till you see some results from your podcast? So
it depends on the results. So if you want downloads, then if you launch it correctly, then instantly you will have downloads. There's no comment section. Spotify kind of has one, but there's really no comment section for podcasts. So you're not going to really get any metrics. So that's why you're not going to get any qualitative metrics. So that's why we use social media to create a comment section, right? Because podcasts don't have one. But back to your question, for our clients, if it depends on the stage of the business, but for organic content, like 30 to 60 days is when you're going to start seeing people reaching out to you on LinkedIn saying, oh, hey, I saw that video. I saw that post. I saw that video. That's why I reached out. Like, yeah, it's going to happen pretty quickly. Now, if you're looking at when are you going to reach 100,000 podcast downloads? Well, yeah, that's going to depend on a lot of factors.
I think it also depends on the niche, obviously. If you, as you say, super niche, Chris Brown times 3, probably hard.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you could be successful and not have a lot of downloads. So that's what niche podcasting is, right? You can reach the upper echelons and never go viral or never reach the top charts, you know?
That is true. So for entrepreneurs or business who do not have so much extensive experience in like the whole podcasting world with video, with audio, what do you think, how do they outsource this part effectively? And would you consider, like, what key aspects should they consider for attracting the right partner in this regard?
Yeah, this is great. So if you are a business owner, say for instance, you're doing 20 to 50,000 a month, maybe up to 100,000 a month, we're going to zoom out again, which is basically you're not going to have a CMO because your company's not big enough yet. And if you do hire a CMO, you're probably overpaying them anyway. So then we have, VP of marketing or a marketing manager, right? Or a marketing manager with a CMO title, which I'm not that mad at. So we have a marketing manager. They manage. That's what their job is, not results, management. So they manage the marketing, right? Then under that, you might have maybe like some kind of like head of content or like somebody who's just in charge of the content and making sure that works. And then you might have some kind of production team, right? Or some kind of editing team or graphic designers, video editors, etc. So when you're at this stage of like 20, 50,000 up to 100,000 a month, you shouldn't really be writing posts anymore, but you're like kind of still in the weeds of the sales and marketing because that's why you're successful, right? So now you're like, yeah, I feel like we got to outsource something here, right? Or we got to bring somebody in, right? There's 2 types of outsourcing. There's done for you and there's done with you. So the done with you is more inexpensive. And what that's going to be is it's going to be another company coming in to help your team execute a certain thing, right? So in this case, say it's podcasting and LinkedIn content. You're a business that has a podcast. You want to get leads from LinkedIn. Okay, Podcast Principles is going to come in and we're going to figure out who's doing what. How much are we spending on video editing a month? How much is that bringing us? Do we have a blog, right? We're going to do the whole audit and then we're going to help us optimize the content so it brings in leads, right? That would be a done with you side. But maybe you go, you know what? Once I put all this together, my VP of marketing, my content person, and then all my team, that's costing us $30,000 a month, right? It's like, and then I got to pay salaries, benefits. I wonder if I could just hire a company and I get all those people and it could be the same or less. Yes, that's possible. But now your job is what's called procurement, which is procuring vendors, right? So that's the problem. The same problem we mentioned in the beginning. Founders have been going off gut and intuition and no data, right, to get them to where they are. So what are they going to do? They're going to like find somebody they know, or they're going to go on LinkedIn and see this first post that they see, right? Or whatever. So then we have to go off of, it's very case by case, right? Done with you is really good if you are kind of, at the lower echelon where you have just enough money to get help, but not enough money to hire your own team. Okay, I could see done with you, pros and cons of that. Then you have done for you, which is, no, we have the money. I just can't see us hiring 6 people in-house for this, right? And then, yeah, but they're in the Philippines and they're VAs. Yeah, there's tax obligations there, right? Especially if you're in the US, right? So now you got to get a compliance person come in to make sure the tax is right, right? So there's all of these things that I've thought through that a lot of people don't think through. So it comes down to just what is right for you and your business, and also finding the right vendor. If you don't find the right vendor, you shouldn't do it, right? You shouldn't just have an email vendor just because you need email. They have to be the right email vendor, right? Or they need to be the right podcast vendor. So it's really a question of done with you. Well, it's a question of DIY, which you should basically never do unless you're a really small business. And then next is done with you, which is, okay, we have enough to throw at this. We know it's going to work. And then done for you, which is maybe I don't want to hire an entire team internally. It's way easier to fire a vendor than it is to fire anybody within your business.
Let's wrap it up with 5 rapid questions. What is your favorite podcast?
I'll still go with Rogan, baby, because that's going to pop up on my Spotify Wrapped today as my most listened to podcast. So we'll just go with that. It's easy.
What is the greatest advice you could give to our audience?
I think advice is dependent on the receiver. But I will say, whatever you do, just make sure that you're where you want it to go. Make sure you figure out where you want it to go. Whether you write that down on paper or you hire a coach. For me, I hire people. I hire a coach. I have a business coach, life coach. Like, I want help. So I go and get it. I don't just sit there and I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. And so you got to just what I would say is hire somebody, especially if you've never hired somebody to help you with something that you're super confident in doing. Watch what happens when you hire somebody. Either it's going to be a train wreck and then you're going to learn a lot, or it's going to be great and you're going to learn a lot. But either way, you're going to learn. So that would be my advice is whatever you do, make sure you're going to do it to the fullest extent and know where you want it to go. Because if you don't know where you want it to go, then you're definitely not going to get there.
I love it. Who would you consider to be your biggest hero?
That is these questions got hard quick. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a combination of like 3 people. So like my dad and then both of my grandfathers, my dad is just like, he just works, man. Like it's just got the work ethic from him, and then both of my grandfathers for their own reason, but my one grandfather was very money oriented. He was just like, how are you getting money? How much are you getting? That's what he would ask me. Where do you have a job? And so he was like a sergeant in the Korean War, but we didn't know until he died. Like he didn't even tell anybody, which that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, he also learned finance when he was in his 50s, ended up buying multiple houses and making a lot of money in the stock market. And he did it all later in life, right? So I'm trying to learn this now. Then my other grandfather was went to college when he had 3 kids. He worked for Tiffany, the jewelry company. He worked for large companies, and he basically just worked his way up, and he was like the most honest person that you've ever met. So these 3 guys, those are my heroes. Those are my guys.
Oh, so nice. What are you looking for the future?
My purpose is to inspire people to do things like this. My purpose is to have, in this case, in this format, it's business owners or founders, but basically anybody to allow their voice to be heard and put their voice out there, right? Because if you don't do that, you don't get anything that comes from doing that. And the benefits of that are, I can't tell you what they are. Nobody can tell you, right? You don't know what's going to happen if you put yourself out there, right? So that's my purpose, right? What I do is I do podcasting and music. That's what I do. I just happen to help founders with their podcast, but that's ultimately what I do. So for the future, my goal is to just live my purpose. And that's all I want to do.
Cool. And last but not least, what's your favorite book?
Favorite book? The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Interesting.
Good one. That I gave you that one because it's a tactical one. There are other books that I love that are not as relevant to this audience, so I'll leave you with it. That one will be more than enough.
Okay, and very last question. Where can people find more about Podcast Principle and Ryan?
Yeah, so Ryan R Sullivan, Google is your friend. I'm just saying it's just easier. If you just put the R in there, I'll come up. And then, LinkedIn's my main platform. And then if you can find my Instagram account, have fun because there's a surprise there.
Once you save time and level up your podcast creation,
I just found in an eye that it is a game changer, which can streamline your workflow, just like Ryan uses his podcast content to generate other content.
click on the next video because you will see how it can do 50 hours of work for your podcast with just a few clicks.